FNAF has a problem. It's really confusing. 14 games and a story which takes most channels here on YouTube over multiple hours to explain. So how do we fix this? Because I doubt Scott really intended this story to become this convoluted. Does this timeline need fixing? Or is this problem more confusing than we once thought? So let's take it back all the way to 2014. FNAF at this point is very new and everyone's getting on the hype. Because of this hype, Scott had released nearly 3 games in under a year. And the most important part of these early games was the lore. More than anything, people were very intrigued to see where the story would go, and this led to a bunch of things happening very quickly. The story of the purple guy is basically what the first 3 games all amount to. But very quickly, the story of these games become a lot more interesting. And in FNAF 4, we are introduced to the box. This box is questionable in what it is, because even today, Scott doesn't even know what it's meant to be. In the interview with Dorco, he goes that the box once had something in it, but now it doesn't. And he's not sure if he can ever find that one thing ever again. This is albeit not the biggest retcon we've ever had in the FNAF series, but it's a beginning of something that would become a lot more prominent in the foreseeable future. The early days of FNAF were littered with retcons. Although minor, there wasn't really anything massive until the box, which really threw things out of proportion. Like, we had a story that was told in the events of FNAF 1 to 3, which was a fully cohesive story. Then FNAF 4 came along, and so did Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator. And the story just kept getting broader and broader, and we ended up getting into the realm of sci-fi. The first step into this was with Sister Location, with, of course, the whole Sister Location bunker. And not only that, but Michael Afton and him being basically a massive blob of animatronic parts. And weird tie-ins to like the FNAF 4 house in the Sister Location building, just stuff like that, which made things a lot more harder for the average audience to kind of pick apart. And then Pizzeria Simulator came out, and the full story of FNAF was concluded with this game. Around this point, I think it's safe to say that the story itself had came to a full stop. There wasn't really anything else to go off. What was meant to be told was told, and at this point, I think things were at a nice standstill. And then we have novels. And these things are very damaging to the timeline because they added stuff that was completely insane. The illusion discs. These things are very damaging to the timeline. I'm not going to go into what made these things so detrimental to the whole FNAF 4 because I think a lot of you already know the reasoning behind that. It just made the game just pretty much one massive mystery for everyone, but this is more of kind of a warning sign to what's gonna come later on in the series, because at this point it just seems that if there's a problem, chuck a band-aid on it, and if the problem gets worse, then maybe we can fix it later on, but that doesn't happen. These temporary fixes eventually caught up, and at this point the timeline has literally changed since like 2018. Everything has been slightly altered in a way, from Dream Theory to the illusion disc to just everything. There's been a lot of change in the timeline. It's pretty evident that Scott didn't really have an answer to any of these questions that he made. We don't even know anything about the motives of the characters. We obviously know their outline, what they are meant to be. Obviously William Afton, the big bad guy, but what are his actual motives? We're just here to believe that the death of his kids turned him into a monster, but there's not really any concrete evidence that this is really what happened. That's just little loose pieces of information put into one. Not really a concrete answer. That leads into the era of Security Breach. The new appointment of Steelwool Studios as the main development team of FNAF was massive. It finally gave a new development team a chance to kind of give their own take on the story. At FNAF 6, at this point, it was a perfect time to reboot the series. Everything had been told the way Scott wanted, and there was really not more to tell. The only way to tell more was to, well, tell more. Just new stuff, and this gave birth to Help Wanted.
Don't kill me! I do not want to die!
And what eventually led to Security Breach. AI, artificial intelligence in FNAF, that's where we're going. Okay, so what does this mean? What is artificial intelligence in FNAF? Well, it is kind of meant to be a lot of things. We have agony, we have other stuff. We have all this kind of cookie crumb answers, but we don't actually have a story here. From Help Wanted to Security Breach, there was something being told with Glitch Trap, with Vanessa, with Vanny. That's cool. But then for some reason in Security Breach, we took a step back and we started going back to the Afton era. And this is where things went off the rails because we had the Blob, we had Burn Trap, we had all this stuff, but we had no actual anything. Also, something that didn't help Stillwell is that Scott didn't actually tell them the lore. It was pretty much up to Stillwell to kind of piece together what was happening in the games, and that led to, well, disaster. However, Stillwell would redeem themselves, and in Rune they would introduce the Mimic. Essentially, Burn Trap got retconned, and we have a new main antagonist of the series being the Mimic. Rune is where I believe Stillwell got things right. The lore itself was actually cohesive. And then to Help Wanted 2, we have even more tie-ins and even more answers. We actually have answers for once. Sure, things are, as vague as ever with the Vanny ending, but at least we have kind of some answers in between here and there with Cassie's dad. The Bonnie mask is, I believe, one of the best told lore implications I've ever seen. Like, we have a mask which is resembling one of the characters from FNAF 4. We have merchandise in Rune that gives us even more leeway toward that being the case. We actually have things to piece together. Another thing that Rune does really well is the Monty ride. The ride tells a story with Monty and how he ended up betraying Bonnie and becoming the main mascot. Fair to say that Stillwell are starting to get a rhythm of how to actually tell the lore that they want to tell. I mean, sure, in the past we had clues here and there, very vague clues, but now we actually have concrete evidence that we can put Cassie's dad as the character or one of the bullies from FNAF 4. This is all great, and honestly, with the new 14th installment of the franchise, I do believe that we're in a good position. But there's one problem. There's 14 FNAF games. Either way you look at it, there's now 14 experiences you can play. So where do we go from here? How is this going to be fixed? The best choice, I think, is after Secrets of the Mimic, I think that there should be a full reboot of the FNAF series. And this is what I have in mind. The main thing this reboot should be is a fresh story. It shouldn't be connected to the past games, and it should be its own unique telling of the FNAF series. And this means that in this new game, there should be no prior callbacks to the past. This means that there's no confusion in the community that the past could be connected to this game. It's a reboot, so it should be its own unique experience. The game should be FNAF, so it should be recognizable, but it shouldn't be relatable. We shouldn't know how the story is going to pan out. It should have its own unique story. This means that there should be new and unique characters. A new story that doesn't tell the exact same thing that the original games were. The character designs should be familiar, but not the same. Obviously, you can have the main characters be the same or similar, but make sure characters like the puppet have some more uniqueness to them. I think a good way in describing this is the Junior's designs. Kind of that type of reinterpretation of the original animatronics would be pretty cool. And the main thing is that books shouldn't be used as a tool to retcon stuff. Instead, the book should be either specifically labeled canon or non-canon. This will make it so people aren't confused if this book has any canon relevance, and allows there to be more cooler stories without sacrificing the canon. Moving on, the story itself should be a structured story with key ideas, motives, and structure. Scott should perhaps consider hiring any writers to do this story. I am not saying Scott is a bad writer, but perhaps people who are more familiar with telling stories should tell them. But Scott should have full control of the story, however the writers should give him some ideas on how to actually tell this massive plot. I think with all of these ideas in mind, I believe that a reboot of FNAF could be very beneficial for the franchise. It can bring new people to the franchise who perhaps didn't find the lore that much interesting and could actually bring them in and maybe get them into the lore. Because I know a lot of people seeing an hour-and-a-half long lore video may be not inclined to actually watch that and be there for the hour-and-a-half to get the information that's required to actually know what's happening. Having a unique story can perhaps bring these people into the franchise and can just make things a lot more clearer for the average audience. There can still be that massive mystery in the game, but I do think that the actual mystery should be somewhat noticeable, and we can actually piece it together and have concrete evidence that that is what has happened. Alternatively, another thing that can happen is a reboot can be made, however the main timeline can still exist. So we have two game timelines. One is a new fresh take with new ideas and it's a lot more beginner friendly, and then you have the original timeline which has all the lore and continues to even get more confusing, but it's more for the diehard fans, if you know what I mean. This is definitely the best of both worlds in my opinion. However, any way you see it, a reboot should definitely be considered if we're going to get new fans into the franchise. So in conclusion, I believe that a reboot for FNAF is warranted. However, there are some contraries to that. I do believe that there should be, of course, much care taken into structuring this new story, and that time is taken to actually build plots and to build motives and all that type of stuff. I think it will obviously boost the community. Perhaps people that weren't into FNAF to begin with actually now are into it due to the new take of the games, and maybe this could be a new start for the FNAF series as a whole. But what do you think? This video is obviously inspired by this video by fmplus. I will leave his video link in the description and in the pinned comment. I would recommend checking his one out as he goes through a lot more stuff than I did, and honestly, check his video out. It's absolutely awesome. But yeah, a lot to think about. And I hope this video has been somewhat enjoyable. If you have enjoyed it, smash a like, and if you never want to miss out on a future upload, then consider subscribing as well. But anyways, until next time, take it easy and goodbye.